Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Unraveling Politics, a weekly political analysis show. So I am off for this week, and we have a non-news to talk about, topic to talk about this week. Anything that happened last week or this week, we'll have to discuss next week. So as you can tell from the title, we are looking ahead to the midterm elections next year, as well as elections that are coming up this year. Believe it or not, we are now 7 months into Trump's second term, and as always, pundits are looking forward to the midterm elections next year. It's a cliche that people are always looking at the next election. And while I'm definitely not a pundit, since I'm on vacation, we have two statewide elections coming up this year, and I'd like to talk about it. So, for those of you who are unaware, politics is very cyclical. Democrats are up some years, Republicans are up another. Usually, but not always, the midterm elections for the president's party is bad. There are certainly plenty of exceptions. 2022 was decent. It was definitely bad, but it wasn't as bad as it could have been. 2002 was actually a pretty good year for Republicans. So there are plenty of examples. There's plenty of examples of bad years and a handful of good years. So let's look at let me just say for the 2006 and 2014 midterms, those were Bush and Obama's second midterms. Those were pretty bad. The second term is usually always worse than the first, and we are in the second term of the Trump administration, even though it does kind of feel like a first term. It's hard to say just how bad this will be. There are some polling we can look at first. So the polling I always look at is for the midterms is three key things: the president's job approval, the generic ballot, and the president's approval rating on the economy. So as for the elections this fall, not the midterms, the polling still remains important. In 2021, when these seats were last up for grabs, the generic ballot showed Democrats had a small lead over Republicans, just 3% at the time of the Democrats' lead had nearly vanished, dropping down to 1%. So I believe it was 3%. It was 3%, and then it dropped down to 1%. And my point is, neither party was particularly popular in the run-up to the elections that year. President Biden's approval rating was just 42%, according to Gallup, which is fairly low. And President Trump had just left office a couple months before, and his approval rating was in the toilet. It was around 30%. And I believe this explains why local issues became such an important factor in Virginia and New Jersey when they were electing governors. The Democrats barely won in New Jersey, nearly toppling Governor Phil Murphy, which is a big deal because New Jersey is a deep blue state, or it used to be. In Virginia, there was an upset. Democrats were favored to win, and they lost. It looked like the Democrat was going to win in a landslide, and the race slowly but surely tightened to the point where the Republican had just enough to win. And this was before the Roe decision, which was overturned 6 months later, and Biden was still struggling to pass Build Back Better, and as I said, Republicans were struggling to rebuild from Trump's defeat. This time, now it's 2025, what has changed? Democrats had a narrow but not insignificant lead on the generic ballot, just 4%. President Trump's approval rating at the moment on the economy is negative 13, and the overall approving is minus 5.5. Still, about 41% of Americans believe we are on the right track, which is high by historical standards. So the picture is a bit muted here, but favors Democrats at the moment, and the polling in these two states reflects that. Democrat Congresswoman Abigail Spanberger has an 8-point lead over Lieutenant Governor Winsome Sears, who is a Republican, and some pollsters are rating this race as safe Democrat. I disagree. I would say this race leans Democrat because usually races like these tighten in the final days. Besides, we have not got much polling recently, so the picture of the race remains unclear. With New Jersey, there's even less polling. This was once a safe Democrat race back in the late 2010s, but that changed as Republicans gained with Hispanic voters, and we saw that because Kamala Harris just barely won New Jersey. And Democrat Jackie Sherrill has a 20-point lead over Republican Jack Ciattarelli, but that only had 621 respondents in the polls, and generally I don't use polls with less than 1,000 participants. And I have this election as leans Democrat because we just don't have a lot of information here. It might even be likely, but I would not say this is a safe race. What should concern Republicans is Reuters has a majority of Republicans considering Trump as the major factor of their vote. and considering Trump is not particularly popular at the moment, and this is a blue state, that's usually a bad sign. Democrats should win these elections by about 10 points if they are in shape to win back the House with a comfortable majority. If it's 5, then they are in trouble. If it's a virtual tie or Republicans win both, they're in deep trouble. And I don't think Republicans are going to win either at this moment. And lastly, I want to say Republicans did fairly well in 2021, but they underperformed in 2022. They still retook the House. They actually lost the Senate seat. So Democrats were able to hold Republicans to a narrow House majority, and they were able to hold on to the Senate, which allowed President Biden to continue to nominate judges for the rest of his term. And to answer the question in the title, yes, these elections can point to 2026, but there are plenty of detours after November 4th, 2025. Here is a very early look at the Senate map before we wrap up. I think I've done this before. I think I did it right after the last election. But now things have changed, and it's worth reminding everyone. So the House is split 215 to 222, and Democrats need just 3 seats to win the majority. Now, a lot of Democratic members are really old, like really, really old. Nancy Pelosi is 84 years old. Jim Clyburn is 86 years old. And having members die when you have a narrow majority is extremely bad, as Democrats have learned. If they had none of their members had died, their tax cuts may not have passed. The good news is, for Democrats is, I estimate there are about 20 Republican seats in play at the next election. And they really want to have 225, no less than that. 220 is the bare minimum. And by in play, I mean both parties could potentially be competitive in. So I will try to make this as simple as possible without getting too much into it, because we are still over a year out. A lot of the details have not been nailed down yet. Democrats have 22 seats they won in the last election by less than 5%. Republicans have 15. Now, they won an extra 8 between 5 and 10%. So I'm going to say about 5 of them are potentially in play. And Democrats are unlikely to lose any seats that they won between 3 and 5% in the last election. And Texas changed its map, or they might change their map. I talked about this a couple weeks ago. And Ohio might do the same. Florida might do the same. So there could be a couple extra seats there. And if all of those states change their maps and none of the Democrat states do, then I would say the Republicans are probably favored to retain control. They might lose a seat or two, which would be absolutely chaotic because they're already unable to get really anything done. But I would say that Republicans would be favored. But assuming that the redistricting comes up even, then I would say that there are still about 20 Republican seats that they can gain. And Democrats really need 5 out of the 20, which is definitely doable. 2 were won by less than 1%, and 9 were won by less than 3%. And Republicans in 2024 won the national popular vote for the House by 2.6% in the last cycle. So if Democrats can get that number down to below 1, then they should be in good shape. And as of now, they are leading the generic ballot by about 4%. It depends on the poll that you look at. So they are on track to retake the House, putting the redistricting aside. As for the Senate, that is going to be much more difficult. And I would say that's the more interesting one. Democrats have 47 seats, Republicans 53. Democrats need 3 to tie, and then again, J.D. Vance will be the tie-breaking vote, so they need 4 seats to retake the chamber. And I'll put the Senate map up for you on screen to see if you're watching on YouTube. There are several colors, so let me explain it for you all. First of all, gray means there is no seat up for election, so ignore these states. Light red means the Republican incumbent is seeking another term. Light blue means the Democrat incumbent is seeking another term. The dark blue and dark red mean the incumbent is not seeking another term. As you can see, 3 Republicans are not running again, and 4 Democrats are not. The bad news for Democrats is the incumbents that they have that are retiring are in more competitive states. Kentucky, Alabama, and Illinois are not competitive, so forget about those. North Carolina, Minnesota, Michigan, New Hampshire, they tend to be the closer states. However, this is expected to be a year where Democrats do better. So I'm expecting Minnesota and New Hampshire to stay with the Democrats pretty comfortably. That leaves Michigan and North Carolina. Democrats are going to be in a tough fight in Michigan to hold on to that seat. As of now, I expect that they will. North Carolina is probably a leans Democrat state because the popular former governor, Roy Cooper, who was once considered to be Kamala Harris's VP in the distant past, I know it feels like ages ago, he's going to be the Democratic candidate for sure. So that would be one gain, and they would still need 3 more. And this is not really a happy hunting ground for Democrats this cycle. The good news for Democrats is the only other state that they're going to be in a tough fight in Michigan, but I think they're going to hold on. The only other state they would have to reasonably worry about losing would be Georgia, where Jon Ossoff holds the seat. There are no other seats where Democrats have to defend heavily. Republicans might put up a fight in New Jersey and Virginia, but I'm not going to think that they're going to get anywhere. And Republicans will be mostly playing defense, but that still means it's not going to be a happy hunting ground. So here's the states to watch for. North Carolina, I already explained that. Of course, there's Ohio, there's Maine, there's Iowa, Nebraska, Alaska, and Texas. So there is a path to the Democrats' majority, but it runs through very red states. Even if Democrats magically win all these seats, it would not be a progressive majority. It will not be an AOC majority. It will not be a defund the police, Green New Deal, Medicare for All majority. It will be a moderate or conservative majority for sure. So we already talked about North Carolina. Ohio was the seat that J.D. Vance held until he resigned, and that seat is potentially open. And former Senator Sherrod Brown, he was just defeated in the last election. He is running for the seat again. He's well known in the state. He's probably the Democrats' best chance of winning the seat, even though I still don't think they're going to win there. Then there's Maine. This is the second most likely Democratic pickup. The only senator from the opposite party to the presidential election that is up this cycle is in Maine. And the incumbent is Susan Collins. And Kamala Harris did win the state reasonably comfortably, I believe about the same as Hillary Clinton. And their Republican Susan Collins has been in office since 1997. And she has faced tough challenges before, and they've always melted away at the end. Her opponent was supposed to easily win last time in 2020, but Collins beat her. And that is why I'm extremely skeptical of Democrats who think that they're going to win this seat. And the Governor Janet Mills, she might run for the seat, and she might be a strong candidate, but I'm still skeptical. We'll have to wait and see until we get more polling information, and even then, I would still be skeptical of it because polling showed an 8 to 10 point lead for the Democrat 6 years ago, and Susan Collins still won. Then there's Iowa. This is a very red state, and the reason why I'm bringing this up is because there seems to be a strong candidate in Zach Walz and J.D. Slotkin. I still think Joni Ernst, she's the sitting Republican, will win more narrowly than she'd like. She's been in the news for saying some very weird things. I still think she's going to win. And then there is Nebraska. This is probably the most interesting state. This is a deep red state, and Democrats do not do well in Nebraska except in the suburbs around Omaha. Dan Osborne is an independent candidate, and he is considering a run for Senate. He almost beat Deb Fischer last cycle, and he is a clear independent. He's not a Democrat, but Democrats usually, if there's a strong candidate, like an independent candidate, they will not run their own candidate, and instead they will support the independent. And that's what they did in 2024. He almost beat Deb Fischer, and now he's running against Pete Ricketts, who is the Republican senator. The thing is, Pete Ricketts is a fairly strong candidate. He was the governor of Nebraska, and he seems to be decently well-liked in the state. And I think Pete Ricketts will hold on. And lastly, there is Alaska and Texas. Now, these are both red states. They're not ruby red, but they are red. And Mary Peltola would be the Senate candidate. I don't think she is running. She was Alaska's representative for 2.5 years, and Alaska only has one district, so the Senate seat and the House seat are the same. Usually most states, that's not the case. She might run for Senate, and if she does, she would be a very strong candidate to run against Dan Sullivan, who you don't really hear much about him, at least not compared to Lisa Murkowski. And then Texas is trending closer and closer. Every election, it gets a little bit closer. And John Cornyn is the incumbent, and he's running against Attorney General Ken Paxton in the Republican primary, so it's going to be a red-on-red fight. So if Ken Paxton wins, he's a weaker candidate. He's been plagued by corruption and scandal, but he is leading in the polls, and he has a decent lead too. In fact, if I was John Cornyn, at this point, I would consider dropping out of the race. If he wins, which I believe he will, Ken Paxton, then Democrats will be able to have a decent shot at winning this seat. I still expect that Democrats are going to fall short, and unfortunately, the corrupt Ken Paxton is going to win. But they have a decent shot here, and I would say that they should pour as many resources into the state as humanly possible if Ken Paxton is the nominee. If John Cornyn is, then I would say don't even bother. The state would not even be on the map. So Senate races are usually often about party over person, and while candidates do matter, as Republicans learned in 2022, they put up some very weird candidates across the country. For example, they did his name is escaping me, but he ran for governor in Pennsylvania, and he had no chance of winning because he was crazy. For example, in South Carolina in 2020, Democrats had Jamie Harrison, who seemed to be a rising star within the party. He was easily beat by Lindsey Graham. So I think the Senate, as of now, was going to be either 49-51 or it's going to be 48-52, which would be disappointing for Democrats. They definitely want to win the Senate, but that would be a little bit of progress. The most likely outcome for them would be between 48 and 50 seats. I would put the chances of them winning the majority at about like 1%. It's very low. And while the House, I would say maybe 80%. So that is going to, I think retaking the majority is completely off the table for the time being. So that is it for this episode. It is a little bit shorter than usual. And thank you for tuning in as always. I will be back next week. Next week is actually Labor Day. So please I hope you have a great Labor Day weekend. And I look forward to talking to you then. Have a good one. Bye-bye.